This manhwa starts off with a beautiful moonlit evening in the royal palace. It is a celebratory night in the Arzen Grand Palace. In the opening scene, the fireworks whirled through the sky burst and create a beautiful pattern. Above the royal palace, the protagonist walks through the dimly lit corridor. When she hears a compliment about her blonde hair, the sudden voice leaves her guarded and cautious. She turns around and firmly questions who is there and what they are and reminds them about her warning to not speak to her. In the palace we see a pair claiming to be royalty who are disappointed by her behavior in question, her etiquette, and expect better from her as the daughter of that house. And they call it interesting that she is capable of seeing them and make the assumption that she must be a witch. They tell her she'll be executed if people find out and ask if her mother Violetta ever taught her this before she died. This weirds out our female lead, who then coldly tells the ghosts she has no business with them and tells them to go back to where they came from. She walks away and mentions how she is well aware that magic is prohibited in this land. The story begins from the founding of the Empire Kardais, and who will eventually unify the continent of Akrona and rule over it alone for 1,000 years. The apparent Golden Empire on this abundant land also lived in a period of darkness when the people on the land became the victims of epidemics of normal weather, extreme drought, rain, storms and hail. All these disasters raged on only within the land of this empire, leading to the belief that the empire is cursed. The hearts of the people began to falter due to how many people died without a cause. This is when there appeared the kingdom of the Sea Fish Team. They used people declining faith to their benefits and persuaded them for a revolution. They disguised themselves as the well-wishers. But inside their actions had another purpose. If the carrot is an empire were to fall, this team would naturally become the dominant power in the region. The prospect of war simmered in the continent, already being ravaged by disease and disaster. That was until the misfortunes suddenly stopped and no one knew the reason why. The emperor of the empire accused the descendants of the magicians for all the calamities, because they were against them before the foundation of Kardais and empire, and forbade unauthorized magic and warned about the harsh punishment of the believers. Thus began the persecution of the sorcerers, and the Kard is an empire. Thanks to the Vision Team's efforts went in vain. Since the justification originally to attack the empire was to save the people, the prosperity of the empire blossoms once more as if nothing had happened, and it continues to do so until today, or is in the strategists and Hazen Shudu of the military power. These two families became the aides of the Golden Empire in helping them uphold the Golden Empire. In the midst of all this, Rose was born into the ducal family of the origin of strategists. Rose states she had everything but that she also possessed the curse of being able to see the ghosts and was born as Rose in teen hours, and she can also recall her memories of her past life as you see all women South Korea. She remembers everything that happened to her and how although her body and circumstances change, still managed to retain this cursed ability. She just had one wish, and that was to live her new life peacefully. She then remembered the main character she read in a novel some time ago. Unlike how others might feel in her situation, she did not miss her past life at all. She can never, because she has the confidence. The door creaks open as she walks in and says with conviction that no matter where she is and what kind of life she lives, nothing can be worse than the hell she lived as an NPC before, and therefore has no will to return to her previous life. She felt as though she was in an endless race where she'd get eliminated if she fell behind for even a moment. It did not occur to her out of the blue she could see the ghost the moment she was born, and that the world never accepts children who are different. Sadly, her family was not an exception. Fortunately, a relative agreed to take her in, and they also helped her finish up to middle school. Her teacher also asked her if she resented her parents. To her surprise, she did not. She even acknowledged how hard it would have been for her mother to raise her as a single mom at that moment. Even for a little bit, she hoped that someone would finally understand her. Obviously, the result wasn't good. She kept on suffering many similar failures during her adolescence. She slowly started to grow up, and the students in her class started to talk about her being weird and how he saw her talking to herself. One classmate mentioned how he heard you and can see ghosts, while others thought she was making it up and believed that she did it for attention, and they found her creepy. Rose started to see the way people saw her. People were hurting her, she kept falling down and the scars got more deep and painful, yet she never shed a tear. She didn't even have anybody to vent to, nor could she afford to complain. Back then she stood back up alone, and she got used to being alone. She overheard the people who took her in talk about her, that they want her to leave as she gives them creeps, and they were scared she would have a bad influence on G1 as they heard she was a problematic child at school. The person demanded that she should be sent as soon as she graduated from junior high, and that her fate was to die on the street anyways, and that raising her until now was enough. She hears a voice in her mind that reminds her that no one wants her. She doesn't lose hope as she tells herself that she does not feel unfortunate with herself. The voices tell her to come with them and ask if she really thought anyone else would accept someone like her. She tells herself that everything will be fine as long as she can survive, nothing mattered apart from just staying alive, and that everything will be alright as she can make it on her own. Staying alive is the only way to avenge her fate. She had thought she could endure it all, but one day when she had turned 20 Pend, would come without a warning as Truckkin arrives to do his job. You noted that she had a sudden realization in her final moment. She had finally realized how exhausted she felt from all this. A thug occurs in a phone drops to the floor as she no longer felt like running. She was relieved as this meant she could finally rest. This is what made it hard for her to believe what happened next, Rose and Tai, and explains how she opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. The warm sunlight streamed into her eyes and the garden blooming fully, a clear stream flowing across. She realized that it was a second chance at life, bestowed upon her by God. From afar, her parents call for her. Her mother and her dear father's loving gazes embraced her as they tell her to come have a look as there is someone they'd like her to meet. They lovingly introduce her little sister, Court, to her. As she stares, she thinks about how the east wind brings spring and how it has come blowing past the grasslands east of the Acrona like a gentle and warm wind. She acknowledges that the winter will make its way once again. As she rises, she notes that she will not give up though. She starts to run and mentions how the light shines brightly in the dark distant horizon. After this period of happiness will be a long winter waiting, but she will always get back up again and again as she has vowed to protect this light. She would start seeing ghosts from the moment she got reborn into this world. It would not have done any good if she let them know she could see them, so she would decide to pretend to not see or hear. They would discuss how Rose was an ordinary girl and how she'd become the Duchess someday. This was simple enough for her. Up until the year she turned 9, her mother had fallen gravely ill and she was in her father's arms. The first time she visited the imperial palace, she had never seen this many ghosts at once, and they were all discussing her mother's illness. They murmured about how Duchess Hours had fallen ill after her second daughter's birth, and how she'd been battling it for over a year now. They mentioned how her mother would die soon, with 6 months being the most she has to live. This causes young Rose's heart to drop and tears to roll down. She wished she could have pretended not to hear them, but the ghosts would end up seeing her crying. She would be silent as all eyes would descend on her. They would mention how this girl could see them and thus they began talking to her ever since. And now, as she is 25, the ghost greets her with a lovely evening. Right now is the New Year's ball at the Imperial Palace, or then the crowd of nobility. Here the dead mingle amongst the living, making it hard to tell them apart. She notes how she must be especially careful here, as if she mistakes a ghost for a human and talks to it, this would lead to rumors of her being a witch and endanger her family. Someone then mentions how somebody else looks as dazed. There's always another person then tells Sir Fisher it is rude to make fun of a poor lad. Fisher says he does it due to the guy's namesake as this is the ran on half-wit after all laughs can be heard in an unlocked character can be seen. Rose notes how this is the ghost who helped her save Court that one day Rose once again gets lost in her memories of 9 years ago. She recalls when she was in Lannister Palace in the capital of the Cardays, an Empire court. Her little sister, who appeared to be 10 years old back then, was fascinated by the palace. Rose was just 16 years old. Rosen wants Court to behave herself in the Empire Palace and asks her where they should visit first, since they have been in the Garden Court wants to go inside the castle. 2 ghosts appear and praise Court for her choice, as they claim the palace is much more majestic than the outer palace. Rose glares, noting that it's the damn ghosts again and covers her sister's ears. Afraid that Court might hear them, she tells them to beat it as they note how mean she is. Rose thinks about how there are too many ghosts at the Imperial Palace and how she tries not to come if she can. Court, however, really likes it. Here as Rose asks her little sister if she'd like to go see the ballroom. Rose tells her Court will one day go there in a pretty dress which lights up the young girl's face. Rose notes how it should be fine if they just take a quick look around. After a while Rose's heart raced and panic surged through her as she lost the sight of her sister. She is in distress as she had only looked away for a split second, and also notes how Cord isn't the type to leave without saying. She wonders why she has a bad feeling about this, and shivers run through her spine as a thought of something happening to Cord takes place in her mind. She then looks up and finds a strange door, letting her to wonder if the door was always there in an instant. A jolt of shock surges through her as she sees her sister on her knees, accompanied by a ghostly figure that sends shivers down her spine. Her sister calls for her and expresses how scared she feels while Rose tries to figure out about the ghost behind Court. As she can't see its face, she instinctively could tell that Court was in danger. She runs towards Court and grabs her, wondering what she should do. Rose runs for help and thinks to herself. Whether it's a high priest or magician does not matter, in that if Court is blamed for being a witch, she will take the blame in her sister's stead. A blonde-haired man suddenly appears in front of her and inquires who she's looking for. She tells him to move his sight. He warns her to pull herself together if someone sees her sister. Now her sister won't survive. Rose is flabbergasted at this as the ghost tells her that her whole family will be in danger. This causes her heart to drop as she tells him to watch his mouth. She doesn't even want to have that thought, especially after all she has gone through in this life. It's a new life that has been granted to her with kind parents, along with her thoughtful and loving sister Court, all of which are things she couldn't even have dreamed of in her past life. She emphasizes that this family means more to her than her life. She cannot lose anyone else, as it's only been 6 years since she lost her mother. The blonde-hair guy mentions he could help her, but he'd like to make a deal with her. She does not trust him because she believes he's merely attempting to play tricks on her. But he explains about the ghost that she saw without a face. He states those are demons and her sister was born with an innate tendency to attract formless evils. He tells her they just need to rid the evil that's latched to her and that he knows a way. She asks if he knows how to dispel evil spirits, to which he says yes, and that her sister will survive if they chase it away. She's reluctant to trust him, as he tells her he will help if she wishes. She's not left with any other alternative, and asks what he'd like in return. The Casper dude says that when the time comes, he'll want her to do him a favor. He asks if she will remember him as he introduces himself as Ranon. She was in the end able to save Court with the help of Ranon. She opens the door as she mentions how she learned 2 things that day. She notes that Court attracts evil spirits as Rose finds her sister Court wide-eyed, staring into space. The other thing is that a weakness of ghosts as their previous life's name. If she knows their names, she can command them as she wishes. She runs towards her sister and embraces her tightly. She then assures her that it's alright, his Ranon told her to command the faceless ghosts. This is Hasten Karzit, who used to be a member of the imperial family as Rose Aunt Nars, and she commanded Hasten Kardays and with the air around her blowing to give back her sister at once. When blows up in the crash can be heard before a flash follows. It was as Ranon set and the demon disappeared with her command. This was shortly before the Court's debutante ball ran on. The ghost had helped her that day and he seemed to be playing a fool in front of all the other ghosts in the Imperial Palace. A ghost chuckles as Rose wonders why he does this and how his name likely is not Ranon. She has so many questions she even postponed Court's debutante ball until she was able to come up with a solution for her sister's disposition. She also stopped going to the Imperial Palace unless it was a mandatory event. One thing that bothers Rose was how it was a strange contradiction to think that the fallen royal who received the golden blessing of the imperial family simultaneously had become the evil spirit Ronan had mentioned to her. He could be very useful as he knows the name of every single ghost in the palace. These were the enigmatic words he told her, so there must be something hidden in this palace. She then laughs and notes how even if she knew, she would not be able to do a thing about it. It might be best to not get involved in these things. It was ironic that she needed the help of a ghost to help Court. She notes how she just wanted to live a quiet life this time, but that might have just been wishful thinking. On the other hand, the door opens as she stares and notes it is the second prince of the empire. Kardays, and he steps in as someone announces Prince Charteris has arrived. The crowd admires his beauty, as everyone gazes at him. Now Rose is utterly astonished by his presence. Taken aback by his appearance, she realizes why people have been gossiping till their tongues dry out about him. He is befitting of the prestige one is granted by the golden blessings too. Prince is skilled in everything, be it looks, wealth, or swordsmanship. Rose notes how she met him as a child and that this does not matter as this will be the extent of her meeting with any Imperials. A lady next to Rose inquires about her feelings for the prince and provides her the information of him being under a curse. Rose asks if this is the nonsense people talk about and how it is thought that the golden blessing is actually a curse. The ghost lady is stunned that Rose called it nonsense and replies that there truly is a curse. She then asked her if she is not aware of the news that the crown prince has fallen ill since the second prince's talent grew. Rumor says that the card is an imperial family is cursed. It's quite peculiar, but in each generation, when a child with outstanding qualities is born, they will be granted the golden blessings, but that another in the generation will be doomed to a near-fatal tragedy, Rose notes. It is not totally unbelievable, since this is a world where all kinds of things can occur. It's also true that the crown princess War has been living more recursively since his health suddenly worsened. Rose notes how this is none of her business anyways. Despite being a little worried for the second prince, the ghost asks if Rose is still even listening. Rose starts to walk away as the ghost mentions how Rose will regret not listening and that she knows someone Rose would like to hear. The lady finally breaks the silence and informs her that the prince will soon die. Rose is taken aback. Stunned by the revelation of Charteris, she turns back to the ghost who mentions how the prince's cup will get filled with poison. She also heard that both the prince's cups will be switched. The ghost mentions how she heard the plan was to swap the two princes' cups, which causes Rose's heart to beat heavily. She then walks away. As she notes this is an assassination plot. She then walks through a door as she then calls for Renton. She tries to confirm the claims of the lady with Ran-on. He suggests she ask the lady directly and whispers the lady's name in her ear. Gertrude. She called out, her tone carrying a command that demanded immediate attention. The ghost seems shocked as Rose demands to know if Gertrude is telling the truth or just making things up. The lady reveals that there was a private conversation under the clock tower between a suspicious man and maid. Gertrude believed they had harbored forbidden romantic emotions for each other, so she stayed there to entertain herself. A man who is wearing a hoodie orders her to switch the prince's cup at the next ball and to do as he commanded, and asks her to make sure there are not any problems. He warns her to try not to find out anything else if she values her life. Gertrude asks if this sounds suspicious, as Rose notes does sound concerning. Rose feels uneasy, but she still can't be certain if it's actually an attempted murder of the second prince, as it's only switching cups. Gertrude reveals that it's not just that, and that Sir Humpty saw the suspicious man had another secret meeting with the servant who is the one in charge of preparing the alcohol, a sudden voice commanding to put poison in alcohol for royalty attending the ball. This causes Rose to get flabbergasted as Gertrude asks if Rose believes her now. It's a classic trick of bribing numerous people, and when something gets discovered, cut off the rotten end. Anyone who is captured and interrogated will have no idea of anything except the orders they were given. And since in this world without scientific investigation, it's really hard to search for the main culprits. Rose wonders to herself that if the price dies, will the empire collapse? She then answers to her own question that it won't be the case, as the world will find another way and drag someone else's substitute. She asks herself if there is a reason for her to worry about whether the prince meets his end or not. Gertrude questions if she understands now, since there is nothing to be doubtful about, as the prince is destined to die on the approaching day of prosperity. She tells the RSM that if she does not want to regret it. Rose, however, ignores her again and begins to walk away. She thinks about the plot to assassinate the imperial family and if she should risk her life to prevent it. All she desired was a peaceful and quiet life, as well as to protect her family's well-being and to keep on living. She walks out onto the balcony and gazes at the sky. She wonders about the second prince. The moon of the Empire Charter is Cardays, and she gets lost in the wonders of the past where she was once last on her way to the palace. That's when she encountered the second prince in the midst of a beautiful garden beneath a shimmering sky. She locks her gaze onto him and he reciprocates their eyes. Meeting in a silent exchange, his beauty stuns her as she praises his dull-looking appearance as if God spent a lot of effort on create. Dating him, she contemplates whether he might be an angel as he asks who she is. She knows she needs to go back to her father, but she considers it to be alright for a bit because she has no control when it comes to cute things or unexpected approach. Leaves him stunned, his eyes fixated on her unfamiliar face. She says hi and introduces herself as Rosentine. She asks for his name while extending her hand for a handshake. He gazes down at her hands with a perplexed expression. She comes to the realization that the concept of a handshake doesn't exist in this world. She explains that it's a greeting gesture, symbolizing that let's get along well. He responds by asking if such a custom exists in Cardays, and she informs him that she has witnessed people greeting in this way in the place where she grew up. He says he sees as he grabs her hand. The prince explains that he isn't aware of the outside world because he doesn't step out often due to his weak body. He says this is why he does not know much about the outside world and apologizes if he suddenly offended her. She seemed stunned before reacting with anger, asserting that it's not his fault. She assures him not to apologize for such matters and encourages him to begin learning the things he's unfamiliar with. He smiles and agrees, and as she gazes at him, she notices that he looks even prettier. When he smiles, he comments that she is genuinely warm-hearted, that he extends his hands toward her, remarking that this time he will teach her a custom he knows. She notes that it was a fleeting encounter, and she vividly remembers how innocent and genuine the prince was. He greets her by gently kissing her hand. She notes how gentle his smile is as he tells her his name is Terrace and asks if she will come visit him again back into the present. An unfamiliar voice rings and Rose is here. It tells her that even if she lives quietly with her eyes and ears covered, the world will keep on turning. However, Rose believes that living like that is too cowardly. Ignoring that he is royalty, this is still a plot for murder. Charter is Cardays and is a royal of the empire. An almighty person in power who could have caught and Rose tied to a stake and burned if their secrets were discovered. Rose believes it's an opportunity given to her to exchange the price of one life with another. Granted, it would be a high-stakes gamble since a member of the royalty is involved. But she cannot help but think that what if she succeeds in saving him that way? He would owe her in. The price in return would be the guaranteed protection of her family and her. Later, the rain pours down heavily. Rose notes how cold it is. As she finds herself in an unfamiliar village, she realizes it's not the capital and wonders where this is. The sky roars with thunder and sudden thoughts of her family come into her mind. Out of nowhere, a sudden wave of panic engulfs her. His thoughts of her family flood her mind. The lightning strikes in. The blaze follows as she starts to panic and call for her home and family. She pleads for help from anybody as she runs. She calls for someone to help them as she starts to believe these are not her emotions flowing. She continues to yell for help as she notes this is someone else's. A sudden voice startles her as they yell to save me. They tell her she must do this in their stead and to please save her. A loud thump can be heard as she awakens from a dream. Sunlight streams in through the window, filling the room with its warm glow. As she jolts up in bed, the birds chirp as she remained seated, noting what a strange dream that was. We see how she spent all her time inquiring about the second prince from the ghost. She thinks to herself about how she has been stirring things up in the imperial palace these past few days and that she has to find a way to run into the prince. She complains this is exhausting or over. Today is precisely the day in question. She sets a rule for herself that her number one priority is to not let her identity be discovered. She believes she would not have been able to pull off a disguise like this in broad daylight. But if what the ghost told her is true, that her meeting with the prince will be in the middle of the night. They mentioned hearing it loud and clear that on the fourth night, Prince Charter is Cardays and will ride a carriage outside of the capital for a secret meeting with Count Herman. She is aware that if things didn't go well, her life would be at stake, but she hopes that things would just end with her. However, there is an ace up her sleeve that she is sure will work. As she is putting up her hoodie, she reminds herself that it has to work. Rose believes today is the only chance for her to approach the prince without revealing her identity. Later at night, we see Rose covering herself completely to conceal her identity. She's prepared for everything. She even drank a potion to alter her voice. Now she just waits for the prince to show up. After a while, Prince Charter as his carriage rattles as Rose listens in. She notes he is here as the carriage comes into view. Rose thinks about how even though the imperial family's emblem is covered, it still stands out too much. She is silent, before saying she can't afford to hesitate. Now she starts to tap forward, and as she does so, she asks for her mother in heaven to assist her. The horses shout and then come to an abrupt and loud stop in an attempt to halt the carriage. She positions herself in its path and sits down silently. She notes she did it as a person screams of her, questioning if she's crazy, and suggests that if she intended to harm herself, she should have chosen a different carriage to do so. How dare she do that in front of an imperial family carriage? The man has beige-colored hair and bright horizon. That person is the guard of the second Prince Paul's 10 midfield. Rose addresses herself as the lowly subject and explains that she cannot see ahead well due to her eyesight and the darkness in questions. If he called it the imperial family's carriage, does he by chance mean His Royal Highness is here? This realization sends the guard into a state of panic as he understands that he is inadvertently disclosed below. Location of the second prince to an unfamiliar woman. He urges Rose to remain silent, as this is none of her business, but Rose claims that he's the one who's outright saying it. In her mind, Rose is planning on how to drag the prince out of that carriage. In that moment, she recalls the words of the ghosts, who mentioned that the prince avoids revealing his face due to his discreet nature. It is noted that this must be an important matter, as he is having a secret meeting as well, meaning he definitely won't act rash. There is a way to lure him out though, which is by calling him the descendant of gold. In that case, he will surely meet her because he detests being called by that name. Rose wants to know the reason of his detest for that name, but apparently it seems there is no reason. And that the prince finds it annoying for no reason. Rose thinks giving it a try won't hurt. She bows down and says, "O Lord God has guided you to me, O precious royal descendant of gold. Please bless this lowly subject, this app." If it is referred to as an extravagant blessing, the prince says that is enough, which causes the guard to flinch. The door creaks open as the guard calls for His Highness. He steps out of the carriage and asks what's causing all this commotion. She is taken aback that he actually fell for the bait. She realizes it's the third time she's meeting him and she believes his face is truly to her like it. Once again, Rose begins to feign her actions and addresses him as Golden. His Highness cuts her off and tells her to not speak another word. The guard tries to explain to His Highness that this old lady suddenly jumped. Right in front of the carriage, Rose continues to maintain her pretense and accepts that she has committed a grave crime worthy of death. And how dare she not recognize the carriage of an esteemed figure? She begs for mercy and asks for forgiveness. She keeps blabbering and says to guide such a low servant such as her, to His Highness. It is the will of God, she says. As his servant, she has longed to meet His Highness. She tells him in her dreams that she has seen him being troubled each night by the deteriorating health of his brother and also the worry over the approaching winter that will cover the whole capital and harsh snow. She also mentions how he is troubled by the ominous letter brought in by the west wind and uses the golden eagle statue to hide it. She compliments the prince. He is moved with wise judgment. He grabs his sword as she tells him failure to approve the shadows will lead to dark forces continuing to lurk behind him, for that is his lowly subject. She is with him, and if he grants her permission she will be able to help. His Highness the Prince mentions how she said she could help him before asking what it is she really wants. Rose wonders if mentioning the golden eagle was what convinced him. This is, after all, only something as close confidants would know about. Rose, who is pretending to be an old lady, tells them she may have lost her sight and her body is weak, but she is still able to see and hear them, see things which are prohibited to others. The second prince asks her if she's a sorcerer, to which Rose replies that it's a term that many have called her. In her mind, she notes how technically, she only really can see ghosts, though Rose remarks that she now perceives a shadow of death looming over Her Majesty, a statement that startles the prince's guard. Rose asserts that if His Highness believes her, she is willing to vow to remove it with her own hands. His Highness fixes his gaze on Rose with his striking purple eyes and acknowledges her remarkable confidence, admiring her boldness. However, he points out that her words do not really prove anything. If he chooses not to believe her, then that would make her an accomplice of an assassination attempt on the prince. He proceeds to inquire if she has no concern for her own life. Rose concedes he is right and that this is not a light matter, and that it really is not wise to trust the fate of a kroner to someone like her. She replies to him that she shall follow Her Majesty's order to the end. However, the reason she risks her kin before him is due to the betterment of the world. His safety is important to the future of the imperial family and to the very land in which she stands upon right now. The survival of the card is an empire also depends on him as well. His Highness's guards become infuriated with Rose's. He asks her how dare she speak to His Highness like this. In Cardays and the royal family is treated as Golfs. Yet in the presence of His Highness a sorcerer whose mere existence is considered taboo, she dares to discuss the fate of the nation. Rose says that she'd have no excuse if he chopped her head off right now, which is something she can't say she is not afraid of, but that at this point she can no longer run. The guard gets more furious, but His Highness stops him. His Highness acknowledges her perspective, admitting that she is indeed just the sorcerer. Although he is uncertain about her motives for risking her life for the country, he concedes that it might be worthwhile to at least listen to her story. The guard, then, is stunned by this, and the world sparkles as he and Rose wonder if this is magic. The prince then says he is curious as to where her patriotism came from. His Rose notes to herself how the prince is even more angelic now. And when he was a kid, she then goes on to explain that the shadow of death that is draping over His Majesty is a strong sign and a warning that in the near future danger is approaching. She tells him that with this alone it is hard to know the whole truth, though His Highness questions why is that so? To which Rose replies back that the shadow of death is an omen that only gives a small part of what is to come in the future. So to figure out what will happen, they will have to gather all the possible parts surrounding His Highness and complete the bigger picture. That is what she meant. Rose proclaims that as she had already said, she is old and possesses a fragile body so it is hard to move around. So if His Majesty allows, she requests that His Highness take with him her granddaughter who is gifted with her powers to his side. The guards coughs as he asks her if she's willing to sell her own blood and flesh for the sake of witchcraft. She replies that she would never, and that these clues can only be found by staying by his side. Additionally, her granddaughter is more talented and worthy of the prince's trust. This she will surely put the puzzle together. She mentions how life is like walking a path, and that if one knows what fate awaits them, then they could find ways to fight it or evade it. before the upcoming danger is to fall upon His Highness. The work of predicting what will happen while interfering and blocking them will be that child's role. Later, after Rose removes her disguised as an old woman, she experiences a sense of relief. Realizing that she can now breathe freely, the maid tells her that it'll be a while before Rose has to wear it again. Rose asks the maid about the letter that she wrote to her father. The maid says she has sent it to the Count starting today. The story is that Rose has gone to be written to recuperate, and the maid has also made sure to speak with the villa keeper up there already. Rose says good and tells the maid to take care of the estate while she's gone, as the father is too busy to do it. Side note. But why they make the maids look handsome, she wonders about Court as we are shifted to earlier morning where Rose tells Court to let her explain it. But Court is in disbelief and cannot accept that Rose has to leave today and will only come back in a month. Court asks how Rose could not tell her adoring little sisters. Rose asks her to hang on and to give her a chance to explain it. Court is teary-eyed as Rose notes how adorable her sister is. Rose apologizes to Court for causing her distress and not telling her sooner. But that this was a last-minute decision. She reassures Court that even though she had mentioned a month, she intends to return before that time. As Court tearfully embraces Rose, they share a tight hug. Court asks Rose if she will write to her, and that she has to write to her off and back to the present. Rose asks the maid to take care of Court so that she won't feel lonely and to make sure she never goes to the palace. As Rose wears a wig to disguise herself as the granddaughter, she notes that this wig was made using a special technique designed for the nobles. She had no idea it would cover all her hair and goes on to think this is the world of magic after all. We see Rose with long black hair cascading down, elegantly dressed in a beautiful gown. As she's ready to leave, she smiles as she notes how Rome the Vagabond will pull off the con of the century. It was told beforehand that His Highness the Prince has a separate villa located in the west of the capital and to send the granddaughter there. Later we see Rose approach and then knock at the door before the door slams shut. She tells His Highness that she got word that he has called for her, to which he tells her to come in. She then proceeds to bow and say it is an honor to be in the presence of the moon of the empire, and that her name is Rome. The prince says he heard she could be of great help to him, to which Roman says yes. His Highness holds his cup before placing it down with a clack. His Highness mockingly remarks that initially it was her strange old grandmother, Anne. Now it's a mere young child that stands before them. Rose notes the nerve on this guy and reflects that there is only a slight age difference of 3 to 4 years between them, and if she were to factor in her age from her past life, vices. Old Rose then decides to stay composed, though she then starts to tell His Highness to forgive her for saying this in her mind. She wonders why she should even be composed, as she's already come all this way and should not be treated like this. She replies back, saying that youth is not something to take for granted and that it is good to enjoy what you have left of it is. Highness's guard displays a shocked expression in response to her abrupt rudeness. The prince commands her to sit down. He tells her that she sounds just like her grandmother. Rose replies it's because she was raised by her. Rose notes to herself how a sorcerer with proper etiquette would only raise suspicion, and that it's better to act like an on-ball without a proper upbringing. The fire crackles as His Highness has an intimidating and hard-to-interpret expression on his face as he lets her know that he only let her grandmother escape because he had places to be. Rose understands that it must have been due to him not being sure who could be watching. She thinks to herself about how he likely did not want to cause a scene in the middle of the city. She informs the prince that she's aware that it must be difficult for him to trust them, but nevertheless he has called her to this place, which means His Highness is also aware of it. It was as her grandmother has prophesied, which is that there is a conspiracy brewing around him. That very night Charteris had reacted when she mentioned the letter to him. According to the ghosts, the very person who sent the letter was Count Allward. He was the ally of the current crown prince and a main political opponent of the second prince, Charteris. She then remembers how that ghost Lady Gertrude has asked her if enemies would really write letters to one another just to say hello. There had to be something in that letter, and on top of that, the person she saw that day was a servant who worked for Count Albert. Rose regrets as she ponders that it would have been a wise decision to face the prince after she would have found the content of the letter when she asked the ghosts about it. There were obstacles to this, as she had forgotten that they are ghosts. And they can't open letters. Rose believes that if she starts to speak about it too hastily, the prince might get suspicious. She first must figure out what was written in that letter, though the prince then proceeds to ask her what she is able to do. She responds by saying that in his study there is an eagle statue on the third shelf to the right. Behind it is the letter from Count Almart, and she requests that he show it to her. He gives her a stern look as he then inquires if she really has confidence in her abilities. Rose replies that this isn't the matter of confidence, as the moment she stepped into this place and sat across from him, it became a matter of life and death for her family. The fire continues to glow on his face as the prince agrees to make a deal and asks her that there must be something that she would want in return. Rose thinks about how no matter what happens she like him to never harm her hours and family based on her abilities. But in this disguise it would be risky to openly ask for something like that. She answers back to his earlier question and states a life for a life. She would like the Kardais and family to promise that under no circumstances shall her family's lives be threatened on account of her abilities. The prince notes how her grandmother kept mentioning it was for the good of Kardais and how this girl seems to not share the same opinion. Ro notes to herself that there is no way this guy really thought someone would help for free. She then notes that there is no way her intuition is wrong and that the prince will definitely take this deal. The prince taps his head before he gives his word and agrees to her terms to the alarm of his guard. Rowan smiles and shines brightly as she notes she did it. She then tells him that she'd actually like to make one more request. She slams something on the table as she says she'd like him to put the details of their contract. No, actually, their agreement in writing. Very smart choice, by the way. I should have put it in writing when my dad borrowed my money. The agreement can later be seen sitting on the table as it is noted that this world is yet to have any concept of labor row. And yet she notes that it might be time to change that as she silently stares at the prince who is looking over the paper. She sighs. As she notes, there truly is no way to tell what will happen to her once this is all over. Rose somehow is also aware that after all these affairs, her life would be under threat, because it's natural for a person who knows too many secrets to become a threat to those in power. On top of that, if they knew she was in ours and he might change his mind and get rid of her no matter what happens, she has to have some assurance. Prince warns her one last time before she signs the contract that he hopes that her confidence isn't just some reckless courage. And if she fails, her and her entire family will have to die. If she wishes to run, now's the time to run away as he will not take back his decision. She notes how he said to run and wonders to herself where to. She recalls that she has already tried to run from her life. As she grabs the feather, she tells him she is aware. However, she is asking His Highness to please remember this. She is here because she came to protect him. The guard clears his throat as he tells her to wait till she sees the inside to be impressed. Rose decides to not burst his bubble. As she then looks at the prince's face, she thinks back and wonders how she had mistaken that face for an angel's back then, but rather it looks similar to the devil's creation who dazzles others and takes their souls to devour them. She notes how even the devil would fall for a face like that. She looks outside the carriage windows and finds some ghosts staring at her. She wonders if they will recognize her and would be grateful if they wouldn't be able to recognize her. The ghost thinks about where she has seen this face before and they discuss among themselves how the girl looks familiar as Rose gets tense. They then think that this must just be a new servant as Rose notes her disguise is working well. Rose assumes that the palace is a place where one's value is determined by their possessions, wealth and their appearance. Here at the palace, this is a world where people make assumptions about you based on the clothes on your back. Right now it will be even stranger for them to assume she was at ours and based on her wearing a disguise like this. So from today onwards, she shall be working as a maid for His Highness. It's a role that attracts just the right amount of attention from others he had simultaneously, is seen as inconsequential by those around, and allows her to freely move in the castle. She goes on to say that since the prince is not known for not appointing vassals, her existence would be widely discussed. If she takes that role, she states that it marks her starting point and that it's time to begin. A few days later, Rose says that she anticipated things to be bad, but not like this. Someone asks if Rose is the new maiden, then asks what she is doing and why she is not mopping. She asks if Rose is lazy or just a dimwit. It's Moraine, a faithful servant to the imperial family. Rose notes to herself that rather than a maid, she's more of a contract detective, but she cannot say that. Moraine kicks something as she tells Rose that Rose should be moving along as she needs to do Moraine's work too. Rose states to herself that she has accomplished this task numerous times in her previous life, so it's not an unfamiliar task. But the problem is we then see Rose's annoyed faces. She wonders why it got to this point in the first place. She is speechless and full of rage. She explains the reason that all of this is happening is due to what happened 2 days ago. The second prince personally introduced Rose to the other maids, despite her protests. He tells them that this is a new maid who will be working at the palace today and that her name is Rome. Rose is flabbergasted as she notes how this is really a bad idea. She can understand if the prince were to introduce his new maiden, that it would have been fine if he left it to that point. Yet he grabbed her shoulder and said that moreover, she would personally be taken care of by him and told the maids to please be nice to her. This confused and stunned Rose. She wonders what is up with this gesture, as she is sure he knew how the maids would react to this. They all badmouth her and wondered what she did to the prince and who Rome thinks she is. She glares at him angrily as she wonders if he did this on purpose. A fake and teasing smile appears all over his face as he inquires if there's any problem. Rose becomes infuriated, suspecting that he might be deliberately provoking a confrontation with her, leading her to question if he wants to pick a fight with her. And because of his behavior, now the maids are bullying her. As one of the maids claims, if she can't complete all the work by today, there will be no lunch for her, as that's how she will learn to work hard. If she works hard, she might get a potato for lunch, and there are some sprouts on the potatoes as well, so she might have to cut them out herself before she eats them. Rose notes this is what she has to deal with. Rose has a piece of cloth in her hand and wonders how she should handle this. She notes that anyone with a brain on them could see what is going on. At least that was what she sensed from the head maid. The time of uncertainty has come with regards to succession to the throne. When a moon rises, the sun must first set. It is Charteris's rightful duty to fill in the empty position that the bedridden crown prince has left at this time, when his very safety is at risk. He has brought in a maid that he personally chose. The maid before her starts to rages, Rose notes. She will have to find out something soon. The maid raises her voice at Rose, demanding a response. The maid mocks her, telling Rose that she seems to not have figured things out yet, and asks what it will take to get her to learn. She tells Rose to get to it as the door is slammed shut on Rose. Rose notes she was planning to just quietly get to work, but things seem to be the same here as they were in her previous life. She mentions how it is not unbearable, but that she will not stand for this. She recalls the prince mentioning how none of his personal maids have lasted long, so he has not had one in a while. Rose notes that if she turns a blind eye to this, then more people will be treated like this after she is gone. She stares at Marine's laundry and notes that she does not have to worry about making a living and could quit at any time, but that this is not a luxury anyone could afford. She then chucks some clothes as she notes how she won't allow it to Moraine. She notes how she realizes Moraine must not have it easy either, but that her terrible attitude must end here. The air then blows as she notes it is now time to do some scavenging. As she walks around, she notes how she has yet to see this side of the palace before, and then notes that is a distinguished guest of the imperial family. She really never would have to come to this area. She then turns and asks a guard to assist her in finding the servants' quarters. He tells her the location, and while on her way she hears two people communicating about the legendary cabinet that Count Hermann has come to possess. She turns and follows the voice and sees a man and a woman talking about how it's famous and everyone knows about it these days. And then everyone except for clueless Ran-on is talking about it. It is mentioned that Hermann is a noble and the second prince's faction, and that he was the one the prince went to meet in secret that night, Rose notes. She should listen in on this as she hears the cabinet is made of ivory and costs a fortune. One goes still saying that this is not something that can be bought with money. Though as he tells the girl, it is the famous ivory of Mira. Rose's eyes flashes, she notes how the ivory of Myra actually exists. It is intended to be given to one of the princes as a gift and wonders how Hermann got a hold of something so precious. The other ghost calls it a waste because of how it ended up like this. The ivory of Mira, the item is of such legendary significance that it finds its place even within the narratives of fairy tales. Any child born and raised in a krona is almost certain to have encountered this story at some point. A long time ago, a fisherman named Myra sailed out for his ailing lover and would soon discover a gift from God while searching in the southern seas. The treasure, crafted from ivory, was rumored to safeguard a hidden elixir capable of curing any ailment or affliction in the world. Rose thinks it would be remarkable and really valuable if it existed. How did he get it? She goes on to wonder if she's just overthinking things, as the timing of its appearance is too convenient. It came on the crown prince got infected with an unknown disease and Prince Charteris was getting poisoned threats. She then wonders about how that object, ivory Miura, is to be given to the crown prince, and Rose is unable to stop. Prince Charteris is deaf. This thought sends chills up your spine before she then decides to refrain from making hasty conclusions. Hermann is on the side of the second prince. He's someone who would not have any reason to do something that would benefit the crown prince. She knows she will have to find out more of the specifics later. She steps in and asks the ghosts about how all of them know about it, but she gets cut in between when all of them getting surprised and saying, "Isn't this the cheeky hours?" And they note how they have not heard from her for a while and are glad that she is back as it is so boring. Without her, they all fawn over her. Now, as she notes how this might have been a bad idea, they tell her it's so nice to see her as she thanks them for the warm welcome. but that she liked to know where she can get some food. Later she comes back with a lot of food in her pouch. She notes that she needs to get to work, but that she cannot do it on an empty stomach. She then turns her eyes before asking a man if there is anything she can help. And with he is silent before asking if she is the second prince's maid, and then asks what she is doing here. I think she's eating, you idiot. Also why he looked like that guy from Yona of the Dawn. But what is to come? Will Rose get the happy end she so desires? Will her Prince Charming ghost man successfully win her heart? Or will there be an unexpected plot twist? What will happen next? Comment ghost below for part 2, and why not check out this epic recommendation, Young Lovers Reunited. The maid mocks her, telling Rose that she seems to not have figured things out yet, and asks what it will take to get her to learn. She tells Rose to get to it as the door is slammed shut on Rose. Rose notes she was planning to just quietly get to work, but things seem to be the same here as they were in her previous life. She mentions how it is not unbearable, but that she will not stand for this. She recalls the prince mentioning how none of his personal maids have lasted long, so he has not had one in a while. Rose notes that if she turns a blind eye to this, then more people will be treated like this after she is gone. She stares at Marine's laundry and notes that she does not have to worry about making a living and could quit at any time, but that this is not a luxury anyone could afford. She then chucks some clothes as she notes how she won't allow it to Marine. She notes how she realizes Marine must not have it easy either, but that her terrible attitude must end here. The air then blows as she notes it is now time to do some scavenging. As she walks around she notes how she has yet to see this side of the palace before, and then notes that is a distinguished guest of the imperial family. She really never would have to come to this area. She then turns and asks a guard to assist her in finding the servants' quarters. He tells her the location, and while on her way she hears two people communicating about the legendary cabinet that Count Hermann has come to possess. She turns and follows the voice and sees a man and a woman talking about how it's famous and everyone knows about it these days. And then everyone except for clueless Ran-on is talking about it. It is mentioned that Hermann is a noble and the second prince's faction, and that he was the one the prince went to meet in secret that night, Rose notes. She should listen in on this as she hears the cabinet is made of ivory and costs a fortune. One goes still saying that this is not something that can be bought with money. Though as he tells the girl, it is the famous ivory of Mira. Rose's eyes flashes, she notes how the ivory of Myra actually exists. It is intended to be given to one of the princes as a gift, and wonders how Hermann got a hold of something so precious. The other ghost calls it a waste because of how it ended up like this. The ivory of Mira, the item is of such legendary significance that it finds its place even within the narratives of fairy tales. Any child born and raised in a krona is almost certain to have encountered this story at some point. A long time ago, a fisherman named Myra sailed out for his ailing lover and would soon discover a gift from God while searching in the southern seas. The treasure, crafted from ivory, was rumored to safeguard a hidden elixir capable of curing any ailment or affliction in the world. Rose thinks it would be remarkable and really valuable if it existed. How did he get it? She goes on to wonder if she's just overthinking things, as the timing of its appearance is too convenient. It came on the Crown Prince got infected with an unknown disease and Prince Charteris was getting poisoned threats. She then wonders about how that object, Ivory Miura, is to be given to the Crown Prince, and Rose is unable to stop. Prince Charteris is deaf. This thought sends chills up your spine before she then decides to refrain from making hasty conclusions. Hermann is on the side of the second prince. He's someone who would not have any reason to do something that would benefit the Crown Prince. She knows she will have to find out more of the specifics later. She steps in and asks the ghosts about how all of them know about it, but she gets cut in between when all of them getting surprised and saying, "Isn't this the cheeky hours?" And they note how they have not heard from her for a while and are glad that she is back as it is so boring. Without her, they all fawn over her. Now, as she notes how this might have been a bad idea, they tell her it's so nice to see her as she thanks them for the warm welcome, but that she liked to know where she can get some food. Later she comes back with a lot of food in her pouch. She notes that she needs to get to work, but that she cannot do it on an empty stomach. She then turns her eyes before asking a man if there is anything she can help. And with he is silent before asking if she is the second prince's maid, and then asks what she is doing here. I think she's eating, you idiot. Also why he looked like that guy from Yona of the Dawn. But what is to come? Will Rose get the happy end she so desires? Will her Prince Charming ghost man successfully win her heart? Or will there be an unexpected plot twist? What will happen next? Comment Ghost below for part 2 and why not check out this epic recommendation, Young Lovers Reunited.